The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
On this Friday, the South Korean government approved a budget of $523 billion for next year, up 8% from this year, with much of it to be focused on research and development and artificial intelligence to push for future economic growth. Reflecting on his recent visits to the U.S. and Japan, President Lee Jae-myung has pledged to advance his administration's pragmatic diplomacy and safeguard the national interest. South Korea's industrial output, retail sales, and facility investment all increased in July from a month earlier. In fact, the boost in consumption came from government-issued cash handouts. Good evening. The first full-year budget plan by the Lee Jae-myung administration has been set for next year, over a whopping $520 billion. Our Kim Do-yeon leads us tonight.
The South Korean government on Friday approved the budget proposal for 2026, a spending plan worth 728 trillion won, or $524 billion US. This is the first budget proposal for President Lee Jae-myung with a theme of recovery and growth, and it's also the first budget proposal to surpass 700 trillion won.
현재 우리 경제는 신기술 주도의 산업 경제 혁신, 그리고 외풍에 취약한 수출 의존형 경제 개선이라고 하는 두 가지 과제를 동시에 안고 있습니다. 오늘 국무회의에서 의결될 내년도 예산안은 이러한 두 가지 과제를 동시에 해결하고 경제 대혁신을 통해서 회복과 성장을 이끌어내기 위한 마중물입니다.
This marks a sharp 8.1% increase compared to last year's main budget, a significant jump from the 2.5 and 2.8% growth rates seen in the two previous years. The government says it's focusing on performance-based financing, restructuring spending to invest more in what works.
For next year's budget, the government has focused on performance-based fiscal management by drastically cutting what's unnecessary and boldly investing in what must be done.
In fact, 27 trillion won was cut from restructuring inefficient projects and administrative costs from before. And much of that has been focused on artificial intelligence as the government makes efforts to focus on making the nation top 3 in the industry. That's most clear in the R&D budget, which will jump a record 19.3% from last year. Among the 12 main budget categories, this is the biggest hike. On top of R&D, the government will purchase 15,000 GPUs to build out the nation's AI infrastructure. Also notable is 2.1 trillion won, or around $1.5 billion, that's been proposed to help industries hit by U.S. tariffs, including support for shipbuilding. Direct monetary support for citizens will also grow. Most notably, A new pilot program for residents in rural areas will give 240,000 people in select counties 150,000 won per month. But all this spending inevitably leads to more debt. The nation's debt-to-GDP ratio, which had remained under 50%, will surpass that mark next year at 51.6%. By 2029, the government expects that figure to reach 58%. President Lee, however, said this is not the time to tighten the belt.
뿌릴 씨앗이 부족하다고 밭을 묵혀놓는 그런 우를 범할 수는 없습니다. 씨앗을 빌려서라도 뿌려서 농사를 준비하는 게 상식이고 순리입니다.
The budget proposal now heads to the National Assembly for a review and passing as a bill. The ruling Democratic Party's majority makes its passage highly likely. A final vote is constitutionally required by early December, with the bill expected to pass largely reflecting the administration's original vision before the end of the year. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And earlier this morning, President Lee used today's cabinet meeting to reflect on his recent visits to Japan and the United States. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yujin has the details.
Fresh off from his back-to-back trips to Japan and the United States, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung opened Friday's extraordinary cabinet meeting by thanking all those who contributed to the visits.
국민 여러분의 성원 덕분에 미국과 일본 순방을 잘 마무리하고 돌아왔습니다. 진심으로 감사드립니다. 팀 코리아의 정신으로 현지에서 혼연일체로 함께 헌신해 주신 기업인 여러분 그리고 언론인 여러분께도 각별히 감사 인사를 드립니다.
The president pledged to advance his administration's pragmatic diplomacy, saying it is built on the trust and personal rapport he established with his counterparts this time.
외교도 결국 사람이 하는 일이고 국익을 지키려면 마음을 얻어야 합니다. 이번 순방에서 형성된 따뜻한 신뢰 관계를 바탕으로 우리의 국익을 지키고 다른 주변 국가의 협력도 보다 확대해 나가도록 하겠습니다.
In a social media post on Thursday, President Lee said the most meaningful outcome of his U.S. visit was forming deep trust with President Donald Trump through a candid conversation. Their first face-to-face meeting lasted over 2 hours, far longer than planned. Before heading to Washington, President Lee held his second summit with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba in Tokyo. Their talks were seen as an early resumption of Seoul and Tokyo's frequent leader-level meetings, which the two leaders agreed upon during their first meeting at the G7 summit in Canada this June. With both trips now completed, President Lee called for bipartisan support to sustain this diplomatic momentum.
외교 문제나 국익에 관해서는 최소한 다른 목소리가 없었으면 좋겠습니다.
For that, he said he would move quickly to brief the ruling and opposition party leaders on the outcomes of his trips and discuss ways to work together. During the closed-door meeting that followed the president's remarks, the foreign ministry outlined ways to follow through on the two trips' achievements, including through the participation of the Japanese and U.S. leaders at the APEC economic leaders meeting in Gyeongju this October. 송유진, Arirang News.
Now, as Seoul sets out to set the pace of diplomacy with North Korea, officials and experts are still cautious on setting expectations too high. Our Oh Seung explains.
South Korea's top security official has warned against premature optimism for dialogue with Pyongyang, even as Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Donald Trump signaled eagerness to engage North Korea. In a radio interview on Friday, National Security Advisor Ri Sung-lak said it is more constructive not to set expectations too high, stressing that North Korea has shown no willingness so far to engage with either Seoul or Washington. He added that Chairman Kim Jong-un's attendance at the APEC meeting in South Korea's Gyeongju this October should be seen as unlikely. The comments come as Seoul pursues North Korea diplomacy following the Korea-US summit on Monday, where President Lee pledged to be the pacemaker if President Trump revives his role as the peacemaker. We described Kim's planned trip to Beijing next month for China's Victory Day events as a development to watch, raising the possibility of the North Korean leader meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping or Russian President Vladimir Putin. He cautioned closer ties between the three sides could sharpen fault lines against South Korea's strengthened trilateral cooperation with the US and Japan. On that note, it's uncertain whether Kim Jong-un will meet with National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik, who will attend the parade in President Lee's place. Seoul's Unification Ministry on Friday said it would not prejudge but monitor whether contact is made. The ministry also stated nothing has been decided when asked if a Unification Ministry official would accompany the speaker to Beijing. Still, while the chances may be slim, there's speculation Kim's China diplomacy may lead to potential dialogue with Washington.
Because President Trump may try to meet Kim Jong-un on the occasion of the APEC summit, I think it's likely Kim will seek prior consultations with Xi Jinping, just as he did in 2018 and 2019 before meeting President Trump.
But it's unclear how involved South Korea would be if US-North Korea talks go ahead.
Even if Chairman Kim Jong-un and President Trump meet again, it's more likely they would meet on the northern side of Panmunjom, not the southern side. Depending on circumstances, Kim could even propose the Wonsan-Kaima Coastal Tourism District. In any case, whatever form a Trump-Kim meeting takes, Seoul is likely to offer all necessary conveniences to President Trump.
While North Korea's latest remarks have continued to sharply criticize Seoul, the regime has not ruled out engagement with the US, though it has rejected the idea of denuclearization. North Korea's Rodong-Sinmun report confirmed on Friday that Kim would be traveling to China for the Victory Day parade. 오수영, Arirang News.
In other news, the effects of implementing supplementary budgets and livelihood recovery consumption coupons are starting to show, as South Korea's July Index of Services shows positive signs of a consumption recovery. Our Park Jun-han has the details.
South Korea's economy experienced a triple increase in industrial production, consumption, and investment in July, the first such increase since February. This is according to Statistics Korea's Index of Services report for July, released on Friday. Notably, the country's consumption showed 2 straight months of increases. In July, consumption went up by 2.4% year-on-year and 2.5% month-to-month, recording its strongest growth in 2 years and 5 months.
The effects of the second supplementary budget, such as the livelihood recovery consumption coupons and the energy-efficient appliance rebate program, contributed to higher goods consumption and greater use of personal services in distribution, dining, lodging, and beauty.
All industry production compared to June rose by 0.3% as declines in construction were offset by gains in public administration, services, and mining and manufacturing. Equipment investment surged by some 8%, led by transportation equipment such as automobiles and aircraft. Automobile production, however, fell by over 7% due to seasonal holidays and the impact of U.S. tariffs. The government said it will swiftly implement the supplementary budget to spread the momentum of domestic demand recovery nationwide. Relevant agencies will also focus on follow-up actions to the U.S. tariff negotiations and prepare additional support measures for affected businesses by September. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
K-Beauty takes the stage a massive event right in the heart of Seoul. Beauty lovers and business representatives alike joined Seoul Beauty Week to see and experience the latest in K-Beauty. Our Pyeon was there.
A machine scans the face. AI technology then analyzes skin tone and condition, recommending products from a vast database. It's one of the many innovative K-Beauty products visitors can try at Seoul Beauty Week.
Seoul Beauty Week is not just an exhibition. It's a beauty festival that the general public can also enjoy. For businesses, it provides opportunities to expand their networks, while for the public, it offers a chance to truly experience and enjoy K-Beauty. That's the purpose of our event.
On opening day, a special biz preview tour gave industry buyers and decision makers a first look at K-beauty before the event opened to the public. From global bestsellers to emerging brands, visitors can test products, participate in fun events, and take home samples or full-sized products that reflect the very best in the industry.
This is the Trend Zone, where nearly 120 companies are showcasing the latest in K-beauty, from skincare and body care to beauty tech and lifestyle products.
Here, visitors can design their own facial mist, picking a serum to match their skin type and a fragrance to fit their style, and they can even add a personalized label on the spot. Many booths also highlight eco-friendly concepts and natural ingredients. Others show the science behind the skincare, from AI-powered tools to the latest in beauty tech. In keeping with its goal of globalizing K-beauty, the event is geared up for foreign visitors.
I really appreciate they also speak English when they introduce the new product, so we can understand better.
Away from the stalls, there is a whole range of exciting programs, from global marketing seminars to makeup shows and influencer talks featuring fan-favorite beauty gurus. Seoul Beauty Week runs until August 30th at Dongdaemun Design Plaza. Hyunyoung, Arirang News.
One of the biggest competitions in Taekwondo, Korea's traditional martial art, has made its bold return. The World Taekwondo Grand Prix Challenge, often called the gateway to the Olympics, is underway in the southern part of the country. Our Park Hyo-bin takes us there.
The 2025 World Taekwondo Grand Prix Challenge is underway at Taekwondo 1's T1 Stadium in Muju County, Jeollabuk-do Province. Energy filled the stadium with more than 300 athletes from 32 countries competing.
I came here with my teammates to cheer for one of them who's competing, hoping they'll finish first. Being here has made me really want to stand on a stage like this myself one day.
I'm from the U.S. and I came here because we have quite a few athletes competing here. My son being one of them, he competed yesterday in -80 and actually won the gold, so that was super exciting.
This Grand Prix Challenge was first introduced in 2022 by the Taekwondo Promotion Foundation and World Taekwondo as a G2 ranked international event. It was designed to promote Taekwondo, discover new talent, and give athletes wider access to the Olympics. Winners can earn up to 20 ranking points, making this a crucial first step toward the Olympic Games. In fact, the top 3 finishers in each weight class will also qualify for the next year's Muju Taekwondo 1 Grand Prix Series, a G6 event that awards as many as 60 points. The competition is all about gyeongju or sparring, which is the Olympic discipline of Taekwondo. Athletes aim to score points by striking the opponent's chest protector or headgear, with extra points for spinning kicks. This year's competition is especially notable. In the past, this event was limited to lower-ranked athletes. But starting this year, World Taekwondo has shifted to a 2-year Olympic ranking cycle instead of 4. That means this year's event includes some of the sport's very best, like Olympic gold medalists Park Tae-jun and Kim Yoo-jin, as well as athletes currently ranked number 1 in the world. Park Tae-jun, who actually won the very first Grand Prix challenge before taking a gold medal in Paris Olympics, will compete on Saturday. To reflect the Olympic spirit of inclusion, the organizers invited athletes from developing nations as well as participants from the refugee program, giving them a chance to compete on this global stage.
The world's top Taekwondo athletes have gathered here in Muju for this challenge, which runs until this Sunday. Now, all eyes are on whether a new Taekwondo star will rise in this year's competition. Park Hyo-bin, Arirang News, Muju.
It is Friday, which means it's time for arts and culture. We have our culture correspondent, Park Kwon-woo, here in the studio. Welcome back, Kwon-woo.
Great to be here, Dami.
So, Kwon-woo, I heard you went down to Gyeongju, the venue for APEC 2025 Korea. Tell us more.
Yes, so exactly. So the place where it's located in Gyeongsangbuk-do province, the southeastern part of the country, it's, as you mentioned, the host city of the APEC 2025. And as the event is just 2 months away, I saw how Gyeongju is gearing up to welcome all these delegates from around the world with cultural offerings. And earlier this week, a kind of preview took place as culture ministers and representatives gathered in the city. So let's first take a closer look at the city's cultural vibe. A city alive with millennia of history, Gyeongju is set to light up APEC 2025 with its vibrant cultural scene.
From ancient treasures to modern innovations, the city prepares to showcase how culture fuels creativity and drives economic growth.
We are preparing a variety of cultural programs so that everyone can enjoy Korea's past and present, showcasing the power of our culture, especially as the event takes place in Gyeongju.
One highlight is a special exhibition at the Gyeongju National Museum, featuring artifacts from the Silla dynasty, including 6 golden crowns, all displayed together for the first time. The museum will also hold the APEC banquet.
The banquet hall in the middle court of the Gyeongju National Museum is now entering its final stage of construction. Built in a traditional style using wood, this venue will soon be ready to welcome and fascinate APEC leaders.
Work will be completed by September so that it can host events including K-pop and traditional performances during APEC. The museum's merchandise has also been selling out, especially after the global hit K-pop Demon Hunters. Inspired by Gyeongju's heritage, these goods are especially popular with foreign visitors. The museum has already welcomed 1 million visitors this year, including many people from abroad.
Compared to the past, when most visitors were from China or Japan, now even Europeans are visiting. Many purchase goods after learning the cultural significance behind them.
Earlier this week, Gyeongju hosted the first ever high-level dialogue on culture and creative industries under APEC, attracting cultural representatives who seemed already impressed by the city's richness.
The host is going to impress me much more with the cultural sites that you have, your temples, your ancestral heritage, in order to also export talent. It would be super valid and super interesting to have, for example, cross-business expectations, synergies, cross-cultural ideas.
With expectations high, Gyeongju continues preparing to welcome the delegations when they return in late October.
A city where brilliant ancient history and culture will still alive in. But I prefer to mention it as an ancient future city, embracing digital innovation and creative industry to pave the way where the past and the future move forward together.
Gyeongju officials added that more efforts will be made to ensure APEC 2025 is also a success.
It's amazing how we just have 2 months left until the big event. Now, Konu, you mentioned that it's the very first high-level meeting within APEC regarding the culture field. Tell us more what happened at the site down in Gyeongju.
Of course, so there were delegates from around the globe, from including Peru and Indonesia, culture ministers, and that attended the dialogue held from Tuesday through Thursday this week. And the event was significant as perceptions of the culture industry have shifted. So countries now see culture as a major driving force of the economy, to the point where this dialogue was held for the first time. And South Korea's culture minister said that culture carries universal sentiment, which enables countries to connect and cooperate even more. So under the 3 main topics for this year's APEC, which are connect, innovate, and prosper, key sectors including AI were also discussed.
We recognize that the development of digital technologies, including AI, will drive innovation across cultural industries. We also acknowledge that AI could affect jobs and creator rights, and together agreed on the need for collective efforts to protect them.
So he added they will continue working with countries, including China, the next host of APEC, so that these discussions and agreements persist.
Well, everyone knows that AI is now a key factor. Now, how does the government then plan to foster the culture field connected with artificial intelligence?
Yes, so today, as you already know, the government revealed its budget plan for next year, and that also included measures for the culture sector as well. So the administration said it will provide nearly double the funding to strengthen K-culture competitiveness and boost exports. And one of the key points of the plan was greater support for AI-based content production. So the government also plans to create training programs to foster AI content creators as well.
All right, Konu, thanks for all of that tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
The calendar is heading toward the end of August, but the heat of late summer is not cooling down. Heatwave warnings and heatwave advisories are still in place in most parts of the country, with the daytime temperatures rising to around 33 degrees Celsius nationwide, with humid conditions. Showers fell mainly on the west today. Tomorrow, showers are forecast again over the central parts of the country, the Jeollado provinces, and Jeju Island. It will rain in most parts of the country on Sunday. If you have any plans to go out, you should bring an umbrella. Morning will start at 26 degrees in Seoul and Busan tomorrow. Chuncheon and Gyeongju at 24 degrees. Daily highs will rise up to 31 degrees in Seoul, Chuncheon at 32 degrees. Hot weather with frequent showers will continue throughout next week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
There is no greater blessing than to have good health as you grow old. Even though my mom is over 70, she is peppy and full of energy. One day, our family started practicing Taekwondo, and it turned out to be a special blessing for us. Taekwondo family, return to happiness.
옛날에는 택시부터 시작해가지고 버스, 덤프트럭, 낮과 밤이 없이 몸이 부서지도록 일을 했죠. 그러다 보니까 몸이 많이 망가졌어요. 허리 협착증도 생겼고 무릎도 아프고. 이제는 내 삶이 다 됐는갑다 생각을 하고 사는 것도 싫고 완전 좌절을 했죠.
지팡이를 짚고 다니실 만큼 근력이 약해지셔가지고 너무 힘들었는데 우연찮게 실버 태권도라는 거를 알게 되셨어요.
다리도 안 올라갔거든요, 솔직히. 근데 64세부터 태권도를 해서 7년째 하고 있습니다.
인상도 너무 밝아지셨고 빨리 가고 싶다고 하시고 도복을 보면서 흐뭇해 하시더라고요. 그때부터 어머니의 삶이 다시 시작이 된 것 같고 지팡이를 안 짚기 시작하셨어요. 그게 진짜 놀라운 변화인 것 같습니다.
어르신들이 운동을 통해서 노년을 건강한 생활을 할 수 있게끔 도와주는 게 바로 저는 태권도라고 생각이 듭니다.
Not only did mother experience this change, but her fellow teammates also felt reborn due to the dramatic change in their lives.
너무 좋아요. 온 세상을 다 얻은 것 같죠. 제가 태권도 전도사가 된 것 같아요.
열정이 높으신 분이죠. 그 가족 전체가 태권도 가족입니다. 아주 화목하고 건강이 넘치는 대한민국의 대표적인 태권도 가족이 아닌가 싶습니다.
We're a family that loves practicing Taekwondo, so we've embarked on a new challenge.
사실 저희 가족들이 아픔이 정말 많습니다. 제가 아침에 일어났는데 반신이 마비가 왔었고 저희 아이는 태어나자마자 인공 심박기를 달았었고 정상으로도 살기 힘들다는 진단을 받았었지만 이 아이를 보면서 기적이라는 것을 알게 됐거든요. 그래서 태권도는 행복 그 자체입니다.
태권도를 해서 강해지니까 더 자신감이 올라가고 행복해요.
I believe Taekwondo is a blessing from heaven. It has made us hopeful for the future. Every day, we're excited to see what's in store for us tomorrow. Practice it with your family. Taekwondo brings happiness.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로.
나에게 APEC은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
신라의 정신이 APEC 2025로 이어집니다.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyeon. It's been 3.5 years since the war in Ukraine began, and just as a glimmer of hope emerged from the Alaska summit between U.S. President Trump and Russian President Putin, that fragile progress has been overshadowed by Russia's latest large-scale assault on Kyiv. The August 28th attack left at least 21 dead, including 4 children, and over 48 injured, with EU offices and civilian buildings among the damaged. President Trump, visibly disappointed, remarked that neither Russia nor Ukraine seem to be ready to end the war. As public skepticism about peace prospects grows, questions are now being raised over whether peace talks have hit a point of no return. For a closer look into the situation, we invite Min Jung-hoon, professor at the Korean National Diplomatic Academy, here in the studio with us. Welcome.
Yeah, good evening.
And also joining us online is Daniel Connolly, associate professor of international relations at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good to see you, Professor.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So let's start a discussion with Professor Min. So the peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, it was once seen as very promising, are now facing serious roadblocks. Could you tell us what are the key points of contention between the two parties, particularly in terms of security guarantees and territorial disputes?
Well, I think that still Russia and Ukraine, they just are asserting their position strongly to gain the upper hand in the negotiations to end the war. The two countries hold different positions on both security guarantees and territorial issues. The first, regarding security guarantees, Ukraine maintains that NATO membership or similar collective security system is necessary. Meanwhile, Russia opposes Ukraine's NATO membership, but it would allow a collective security system with Russian participation, which it seems to be very implausible for the Ukraine and NATO member countries. And concerning the territorial issues, Russia demands the entire Donbas region, which is beyond its currently occupied Ukrainian territory. In return, Russia want to return its controlled areas in the north to the Ukraine. But the north area that Russia want to return is much more smaller than the Donbas region, which Russia want to continue to occupy. Meanwhile, Ukraine refuses to make territorial concessions, but it is open to discussions at the trilateral meeting between Russia, Ukraine, and U.S. It reflects the Ukrainian people's fatigue and the concerns that in terms of the long war time, that they're tired and they just want to finish the war as quickly as possible. But anyway, I think these different positions have slowed the progress in the negotiations. And as you mentioned, President Trump is feeling fatigue from the current stalemate, and he is pushing both countries in terms of withdrawing from the negotiations if progress is not made. But anyway, but still, President Trump has an intention to make a decision to end the war if possible. So, given the situation where U.S. want to quickly end the war, mainly with the negotiations with Russia, I think the war is likely to find an exit in favor of Russia eventually.
So we'll have to see how it goes, but it seems as for now, the two sides are quite still far apart in terms of what they want. Now, building on this, both Ukraine and Russia have recently ramped up attacks on each other's energy infrastructure, like oil, gas, and power facilities. And many observers believe this is a strategic move to gain leverage ahead of a potential U.S.-led ceasefire deal. Professor Connolly, how do you assess this development?
Well, I think so, but there's a different logic between both sides. For the Ukrainians, a lot of these strikes on the Russian energy sector are a way of demonstrating success despite a worsening battlefield situation. So these strikes are not necessarily about persuading Russia to end the war, because Ukraine doesn't have that ability to inflict that level of strategic damage. Rather, these strikes are more about demonstrating to its European allies and international media that Ukraine is still in the war and therefore still deserves flows of money and weapons. For the Russians, on the other hand, the logic is quite different. For them, strikes on Ukraine can be problematic because the Western media always frames them as signs that Russia doesn't want peace or that Russia is targeting civilians. So as we saw the peace talks begin, Russia kind of calmed down on a lot of the strikes and are now kind of retaliating to these Ukrainian strikes on the Russian energy sector. And if you see today in the news, Trump periodically complaining about Russian strikes. This morning, U.S. envoy Keith Kellogg complained about Russian strikes on civilians. But for Russian war planners, these strikes are increasingly important, not only to deter Ukraine from attacking its own energy sector, but because we're approaching the winter. And this is a kind of a crunch time to weaken the Ukrainian defense industry. So ultimately, I think the sides are almost fighting two different kinds of war. The Ukrainian airstrikes and missile strikes are more of a public relations campaign towards its allies. The Russian strikes are more focused on an attritional military campaign.
Right. So as Professor Connolly mentioned regarding this, President Trump clearly isn't happy about it. He issued a stern warning saying without a ceasefire, Russia will face strong economic sanctions. Professor Min, in your view, how effective do you think would a warning be pressuring to Moscow?
Basically, I think the President Trump's warning on putting the severe economic sanctions to the economic partners of Russia, like China, India, which purchase their energy from Russia, would be the last resort to end the war, and it will effectively work following the President Trump's intention. But anyway, as you mentioned, President Trump has warned that U.S. would put severe economic sanctions against Russia if a deal to end the war would not be made. And President Trump said that the U.S. would impose severe secondary tariffs, the economic sanctions, targeting Russia's remaining trade partners like the India and China. So this would see those countries, India and China, face severe tax if they want to sell what they want to sell their products to the United States. For example, if India keeps buying oil from Russia, U.S. companies that purchase Indian goods would have to pay a higher import tax or tariff when the products reach American shores. So this would make the goods so expensive that U.S. businesses would likely to choose to buy them cheaper from elsewhere, not India, and resulting in lost revenue for India, the country. So the intention is also to hobble Russian economy. So theoretically, if Moscow was unable to make money by selling oil and energy to other nations, it would also have less money to finance its war in Ukraine. And Russia will get into serious trouble in terms of maintaining the war. So given that the oil and gas account for almost a third of Moscow's state revenue and more than 60% of its exports, economic sanctions with secondary tariffs could make a huge impact on Russia's wartime economy. And the same logic can be applied to the case of China, which has mainly purchased Russian energy along with India. Basically, China doesn't want to make its relations with Russia get worse by receiving the secondary tariffs from the United States. So overall, I think that President Trump's warning of putting the secondary tariffs would eventually work, and it will facilitate the negotiations to end the war. But still, Russia is resisting from President Trump's offer of making a ceasefire deal, because Russia and Putin think that it needed to expand its occupied territory as much as possible to the last moment the world ceasefire.
Right, so it would be a strong but a last resort card for the U.S. president. But adding another layer to this, President Trump also hit at Ukraine by saying President Zelensky is not innocent either, raising the idea that both sides bear responsibility for the stalled peace process, of course. Professor Conley, could this signal a shift in the U.S. position from a mediator to a more neutral observer?
Well, I definitely think the Trump administration has swung more towards a balanced stance, if you want to call it that, especially, of course, compared to the Biden administration. But there's a lot of structural factors resisting Trump's shift. So if you think about the U.S. domestic media, prominent figures such as Senator Lindsey Graham, pressure from European leaders, these are all really kind of limiting Trump's ability to shift the U.S. to a more mediator role. And in fact, they're actually pushing America back towards this hardline anti-Russian stance. So we see these days in the media a very curious zigzag pattern where some days Trump talks like he's on the Russian side, and then other days he's criticizing Putin. And this is, I think, a reflection of domestic and international politics putting pressure on Trump. I should note, though, that even during the Biden administration, there were tensions between U.S. policymakers and Ukrainian leadership. These tensions were usually kept quite quiet, and only now are we hearing about some of the spats between Biden and Zelensky. In the Trump administration, on the other hand, these spats tend to come out into the open, as exemplified by the infamous Oval Office meeting earlier this year. At the end of the day, though, the U.S. is a direct participant in the war, right? Their weapons are in Ukraine, they're part of NATO, NATO is supporting Ukraine. So even if Trump describes himself as an unwilling participant, the U.S. is still a participant, and that makes being a mediator quite difficult.
So Washington clearly looks to be a direct participant in this war. Now, speaking of which, President Zelensky is set to meet with high-level American officials today, August 28th, to explore the possibility of direct talks between Ukraine and Russia as well. So given this current landscape, Professor Min, what are the key variables that could influence the success or failure of these peace talks?
Yes, as you mentioned, it is expected that Ukrainian and U.S. officials will meet later today to discuss a potential meeting between Ukraine and Russia. And the Trump government's Russian envoy, Steve Witkoff, confirmed that the meeting would take place in New York City. And the news came amid President Trump's push for a speedy peace deal to end the war in Ukraine. And after having separate meetings with Putin and Zelensky, President Trump said that the next step would be a bilateral summit between the two leaders. And if a bilateral meeting is held between the two leaders, it would mark the first encounter between the two leaders since the start of the war, like February 2022. And it is known that the talk of preparations are being held by the U.S. high-ranking officials like U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the Witkoff, and the Vice President J.D. Vance. And personally, I think the bilateral meeting could be a positive signal for finding an exit to end the war, but it's not certain whether or how much it will actually contribute to the war finishing efforts, because there are many hurdles and considerations to make a progress to end the war. For example, it is known that Russia will not accept Zelensky's signature on legal documents establishing terms for an end to the war, because Zelensky lacks political legitimacy, because his term in office has been expired probably several months ago. And anyway, it is likely that the upcoming meeting between Putin and Zelensky could be a meaningful progress to end the war. But as I mentioned, it's not clear what kind of the concessions and arguments that both sides would make in the meeting. And it is more likely that they just maintain they're asserting the arguments in terms of territorial issues and security guarantees. So it will be just a symbolic meeting to make a progress and to end the war, but it could be the good start of some kind of the meeting between the two countries anyway, and we will see that the results of the meeting, the bilateral meeting, would be a useful indicator about whether they can narrow down their differences and how soon the war will be over. So we can see how much the gap the two countries have and how much the U.S. could narrow down the gap as a mediator.
Right, so we'll have to see if this could become a stepping stone towards further negotiations. Now, on a related note, North Korea has already supplied weapons and over 10,000 troops to Russia since last year. And as the war progresses, could the dynamics of the Pyongyang-Moscow relations begin to shift? Could you tell us about your forecast, Professor Connolly?
Well, I think both sides are finding the relationship very mutually beneficial. According to many reports, the North Korean military-industrial complex is working overtime to provide the Russian war machine, and in exchange, they may be getting technology and know-how. We see a lot of new, for example, air defense systems in North Korea these days. And as a sign of these close ties, we even saw last week Kim Jong-un kind of acknowledging at least 101 battlefield deaths in a very public ceremony commemorating them. The real question, though, is whether North Korean forces will be used in an offensive capability. Until now, they were used in the liberation of Kursk, which was Russian territory occupied by the Ukrainians. I think a sign of a very kind of important question that many people have is if the North Korean troops are actually used in Ukrainian territory, that would mark a very significant deepening of the Russian and North Korean relationship if it were to occur. There are no signs of that happening yet, but that is a potential sign of a changing relationship.
Right, so it's definitely all eyes are on how the ties would develop and deepen between the two countries. But if peace talks actually gain momentum, some people speculate that North Korea might pivot away from Russia and turn towards the U.S. And Pyongyang has even left room for some conditional dialogue. What are your thoughts on this, Professor Min?
Well, personally, I think that North Korea paid attention to what happened in the RK-US summit a few days ago. As you know, in the summit, the two leaders of South Korea and U.S. showed their strong intentions to get out of the stalemate in their relations with North Korea, and they would work together to revitalize President Trump's summit diplomacy and bring North Korea back to the negotiating table. But as you know, North Korea has been cautious in terms of resuming its talks with the U.S., and it is still silent. But there is also a possibility that Pyongyang would respond to Washington's love call when a ceasefire deal is made in the Ukraine war. And as you know, North Korea has survived with the help of Russia over the past few years, and the cooperation between North Korea and Russia has strengthened over time. But if a ceasefire deal is made for the war, the two countries would have different positions in their cooperation. And there's also a possibility that Russia will play a mediating role to revitalize semi-diplomacy between North Korea and U.S. So whether and when a ceasefire deal is made in the war could make a significant impact on North Korea and U.S. relations, the inter-Korean relations, and overall political and security situations on the Korean Peninsula. And it is also likely that North Korea would get back to the negotiating table if the U.S. offers like a small deal, which has simultaneous and parallel measures without requesting the declaration of the denuclearization of the North Korea at the beginning of the nuclear talks.
Right, so the situation seems to be very complex and all tied to each other. We hear that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is expected to attend the September 3rd military parade in China. We hear so North Korean leader, Chinese leader, and Russian leader also will appear together at these parade. Then, Professor Min, how might this trilateral moment reshape the strategic landscape in Northeast Asia?
Yes, the Chairman Kim will make his first visit to China in 6 years to attend the military parade next week. And it will be his debut to the multi-nation event that would bring him together with a large group of world leaders for the first time since his taking office in 2011. And since taking office, the Chairman Kim has met President Xi, the Putin, Donald Trump, and the former South Korean President Moon Jae-in and others. But all those summits were bilateral meetings. And the Chairman Kim hasn't attended any big multilateral events with the foreign leaders. So it will be the first time that the President Xi, Chairman Kim, and President Putin gather at the same event. So the world is paying attention to what's going on there in Beijing. And the three leaders like to share desires to check the strengthening cooperation among South Korea, U.S., and Japan. But it's not clear how far they would go to further strengthen their ties because they have different strategic considerations and national interests behind the curtain. So anyway, the Chairman Kim's visit to China could also be related to efforts to restart diplomacy with Trump. As you may remember, Chairman Kim visited to China 4 times from 2018 to 2019 to meet President Xi. And his first and the fourth visit happened just before he met President Trump for the nuclear negotiations. So North Korea, North Korea has been silent on the Trump's outreach so far, but it is likely that it would return to talks if U.S. would make bigger concessions in terms of the denuclearization or the nuclear talks. So overall, the Chairman Kim's visit to Beijing this time signals that there could be significant changes in the dynamics of diplomacy among East Asian countries. But in terms of how the Ukraine war would be over and what the positions Russia could take after the war and how it would affect the North Korea's calculations in terms of shaping the relations with the U.S. and South Korea, all those situations would work together and probably would create new situations, but they'll relate and they affect each other. But so we'll see what will happen.
Right, so we could be looking for a whole new phase in the Northeast Asia power balance. We'll keep close attention to the developments. But as for now, we'll have to wrap our discussion at this point. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Professor Min.
Thank you.
And Professor Connolly, we appreciate it so much. And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.